أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Okay, so we began with Tawhīd last week and talked about how Tawhīd is different than Tawakkul, different than Rida. And then we reached this point where we need to talk about the different grades of Tawhid, which he says are two. Just like we had two degrees and grades for Rida, one being that in Rida, what did we say? We said that sometimes Allah is happy with you, sometimes you're happy with Allah. And you being happy with Allah is because of His decree, His takwini will, and sometimes even His tashri'i will. You're happy with even what He's made wajib on you, what He's made haram on you. You don't have a problem with that. Alright, so with Tawhid, he says we also have two degrees here. Before I get into his explanation though, I went and checked what Muhaqqiq at-Tusi, Khaja Nasiruddin at-Tusi, he says in this regard. Because as I've said before, this book of Ayatul Jawadi is based on that book. So I thought I'd take a look there, and he had a nice explanation. And then Ayatul Jawadi is really echoing that. So we'll go through this, then we'll go through what Ayatul Jawadi says, and then there's a little story I want to share with you as well. So when you go to Awsaf al-Ashraf of Muhaqqiq at-Tusi, he says Tawhid is two types. Al-qawlu bil-wahda wa fi'lu al-wahda. So one is qawl, one is fi'l. Qawl means to say something, or even to believe something, I would say. But fi'l means to do something actively, okay? To actively do something. Alright, well, what does that have to do with this now? He says, sometimes you will say oneness, you will maybe believe in oneness in theory. Sometimes practically and actively you will make something one. There's a multiplicity you have, you actively make it one. Okay? He says the first one, which is to believe in oneness of God and all of that, he says this is the condition of Iman. In other words, if you don't have this, you don't have Iman. You're not even Muslim. And he says this is mabda'ul ma'rifah. This is where ma'rifatullah begins. Okay? The fact that you believe He is one. So that's for sure. I mean, everyone knows that. Innama Allahu ilahun wahid. Alright. But he says the second one, which is active Tawheed, or actively making something one. What is that all about? He says the other one was the condition of Iman. This one is the peak of Ma'rifah. Well, why is that? He says, well, because it means that you reach a conviction and certainty that laysa fil wujud illa Allah ta'ala wa fayduhu. That in all of existence, and existence means everything, there is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His grace. And even His grace doesn't have an existence on its own. So it's all Allah. And so, but we look around us, we see multiplicity. We see objects, we see things, we see creatures and beings and whatnot. No, he says to see beyond all of this and to see that it is Allah everywhere and only Allah actually. Okay, I do have to make this disclaimer from here on. Don't think that I have experienced any of this or I know what he's talking about, but this is what he's saying and this is what the Urafa say. And we'll get to that story as well later. He says, so what happens as a result when you have this yaqeen and certainty that there is none other than Allah in all of existence, and it makes sense by the way, why? Can I point to any place or any time and say that Allah doesn't exist there? I can't say that. As a matter of fact, you'll turn around and say, don't even say point to a place or a time that you want to ask this question, does he exist there or not? He's beyond all of that. He encompasses all of that. So can I even say that Allah is not everything? Then someone will say, but that kind of implies that you're saying I am God, he's God, she's God. That shows that we haven't understood what we're talking about yet. Okay? Some people call out the urafa, and by the way, I'm not one of the urafa. I'm not known for irfan or anything like that, okay? But I do know this much, that they say that a lot of times these individuals are misunderstood when they say there is nothing in existence except God. The answer will be, some will say is, oh, are you saying my shoe is God? Well, this just shows you haven't understood what they're saying. Okay, they're not looking at the whatness of things in the sense of, they call it mahiyya. They're looking at the wujud of things. As a matter of fact, now this is, you can say, I would say the predominant view maybe, that there is only wujud out there. There is no mahiyya and whatness out there. It's all just existence in different forms maybe. For example, if you have Play-Doh and you've made a little castle out of Play-Doh, okay, out of clay. Do I have a castle here or do I have Play-Doh here? Do I have clay here? I have clay. When you make something out of clay, in reality, what is it? It's clay. Whether it's in the form of a castle, in the form of a dinosaur, in the form of anything, it's really clay. And so these philosophers, they always have this discussion and debate amongst them that what is the actual reality out there? And usually they'll say, but there are some different opinions here, that it's all just existence in reality. So when you look at it from that angle, not from the angle of the forms that they have, all you see is existence, and that means all you see is Allah. People misunderstand this, and they think you're saying my shoe. Are you saying my shoe is God? The moment you call it a shoe instead of existence, that shows you didn't get what these philosophers are saying, or these urafa are saying. Anyway, I even remember reading a story where someone is, I wouldn't say mocking Allama Tabatabai, but is making a joke in front of him, and he's saying, can you pour some of this existence into, like they're sitting at a dastakhan or something, right, at a table, and the guy wants water, something to this effect, and he's like, kiddingly, he says, can you pour some of this existence into this existence, which is his cup? Like he's saying all of it is existence, right? For me, which is existence, or something. And so Allama Tabatabai, he answers him. I don't remember the answer, but answers him like, yo, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Anyway, I don't remember that story. It was an interesting one. It's fun to always shut people up with philosophy, you know. So he shut him up in a very respectful way. But anyway, going back to what we were talking about here, that you reach this yaqeen that there is nothing in existence except Allah. In other words, all of existence is Allah. As a result of seeing the oneness of things and not the multiplicity side of things, فَيَنْقَطِعُ نَظَرُهُ عَنِ الْكَثْرَةِ. As a result, this person, their sight will be cut off from multiplicity. All they see is oneness. This was an active endeavor on their part to shift their eyes from the multiplicity side of things to the oneness of things, that they are all under one umbrella of existence. And if there is only one existence out there, then it's all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm just trying my best to explain what Khaja Nasiruddin al-Tusi is saying here. So, this person, يَجْعَلُ الْجَمِيعُ وَاحِدًا, they will make all of these different things out there, they will see them as one and make them one, and they will only see one, لَا يُبْصِرُ إِلَّا وَاحِدًا. So this person, within them, has transformed or changed that which is multiple into that which is one. And they have gone from wahdahu la sharika lahu fil ilahiyya, they've gone from this to wahdahu la sharika lahu fil wujud. In other words, let me translate that they have gone from this belief and notion of He is only one, Allah is only one, no partner in ilahiyya, in being worshipped. So they have gone from that to a step further. They say, not only is he the only one who deserves worship, and there's no partner with him when it comes to worship, and there's no sharik for him when it comes to being an ilah and a Lord that is to be worshipped. But no, it's more than that. There is no one else out there that you can compare to him in their existence. There's only one existent, actually, in reality. It is Allah. And we are all shadows of that existence. In other words, we exist, but we don't exist as if. Okay, we're trying to put this in words as much as possible. And as you can see, we're just scratching the surface here of Tawhīd. Okay, of Tawhīd, and trying to put it into words. Or else this is something to aspire for or towards. Yeah, and to really wish for. To go from wahdahu la sharika lahu fil ilahiyya to wahdahu la sharika lahu fil wujud even. Forget about whether I want to worship or not. There is nothing else out there for me to worship except Him. Because there's nothing else out there existing independently except Him. And so as a result, he says everything else out there will only become a hijab for this person, a veil for this person from seeing reality. The moment I see I'm going to put it like this, the mahiyat, the things out there, right? That moment that I see things instead of Allah and existence, that is a hijab. That means I'm not seeing Allah anymore, I'm seeing the multiplicity again. The moment you can put a label on it, the moment you can call it something other than existence, and you do call it something other than existence, then that becomes a hijab itself. Because the moment you bring elephant into the picture, giraffe into the picture, shoe into the picture, car into the picture, you have erased Allah from that perspective. So as you can see, there's two ways to look at the world. Okay? There is multiplicity, no one denies that. But in this multiplicity, if you really were to look at it with a philosophical eye, you see oneness, you just see one. You cannot, it's all existence. Non-existence does not exist for you to point to it and say, oh, here's non-existence. It's all existence. And if it's all existence, that means it's all interconnected. And you cannot take Allah out of that equation. So it's all, Allah is all of existence. Something like that. And then this person sees, he says, other things other than Allah as a hijab, number one. And this person also sees their focus on anything other than Allah as a shirk. Shirkan mutlaqan. Here it's not about, oh, am I worshipping this person? Am I not? Am I worshipping this idol? Am I not? Here it's not even about worship. Remember, we shifted it from worship. We said there is no partner for Allah in worship. We shifted it to what? We shifted it to there is no partner in Allah even when it comes to existing. La sharika lahu fil wujud. And so if that's the case, here there is no difference between the different forms of shirk anymore. Have we talked about this before? I think that there's a subtle shirk. There's a subtle shirk that some of the greats point out. The Quran even points out on one or two occasions. Yeah, in Surah Yusuf it says that most of them don't believe except that they're also mushrik. That means you're a Muslim but you're a mushrik. We've talked about this before as well. The subtle shirk, we've talked about that. Okay. We call it subtle shirk because we're looking at it from our lens of la sharika lahu fil ilahiyya, that there is no one else to worship other than Allah. But to see other than Allah, that's fine. But if you are in this category of muwahhideen, that's special tawhid, then you no longer see a difference between subtle shirk and actual shirk. If I am seeing anything other than Allah, that's a shirk in my books, if you've reached that level. Yeah. So as you can tell and guess here, we're just talking about the greats now, or else these are things that are beyond the reach of a person like myself. All right. That was Khawaja Nasiruddin At-Tusi. What does Ayatul Jawadi say? Ayatul Jawadi says something very similar. He says the same way Rida had two levels and degrees, Tawhid also has two. One is to say La ilaha illallah and to believe in it and all of that theoretically, and to know that there is no one that deserves worship. But then there's something higher than this, and that is to make something one actively. And so you can tell he's echoing what Khawaja Nasiruddin At-Tusi is saying here. And then he says, if a person does understand this, does come to this yaqeen and conviction that no one other than Allah owns anything because nothing else exists except Him, then naturally the outcome of that is that you don't see yourself as the possessor of anything. And so when you say, I am submitting myself to Allah, yes, in reality you won't even say that because you don't even own anything to submit it to Him to begin with. And so he drops this line here in Farsi. He says, so if someone says, Ruzi rochash bebinamu taslim vei konam, one day I will see his face, the beloved, and I will submit everything to him. He says that's not going to be enough anymore. In reality, you don't own anything to even submit it to him. We've talked about this before as well. And this is, he says, he refers to it as al-faqr al-mahd, pure needliness, to be in need. Pure faqr. The most purest form of faqr isn't to be poor when it comes to money, for example. The purest form of faqr is when you are in need when it comes to your existence itself. He says this is the understanding that we're talking about of Tawhid here. To understand that I am all faqr. Head to toe, I am always in need of Allah for my existence, not for money, not for health, wealth, these things, no. And so tawakkul will go out the window, rida goes out the window, taslim goes out, everything goes out the window as a result. Everything goes out the window because it's not applicable anymore. When something's not applicable, it's not applicable. There's no point in even discussing it. That line that he said last week, pasandam anshara janan pasandat, goes out the window. I like that which the beloved loves for me. He says that all of that goes out the window. Or else you can't, Imam Hussein won't be able to do what he does on Ashura if you're not at this level. Now I do want to say this, Tawhid, sometimes it's used for the lower level, sometimes it's used for higher, it's interchangeably used. We have to understand this as well. Okay? Last week I talked about how, like Imam Ali, he says, I like health, but I prefer what Allah wants for me. Well, that was rida, which isn't the highest level. Someone might say, oh, does that mean that that's where Imam Ali stops at? No, that doesn't disprove that he has higher levels. He's just telling us that. Maybe that's for us to learn from him what kind of mentality we're supposed to have. Or else Imam Hussein showed us it's beyond rida even. It's beyond rida for him, beyond taslim for him. Alright, so that's that now. Ayatul Jawadi. Now, I want to share with you a little story and then end here. There's a book, it just crossed my mind. I said, this is very relevant to this discussion. Allama Tehrani, one of the students of Allama Tabatabai, he has a book. He's the same one who has that book called Liberated Soul, Ruh Mujarrad, the detached soul, about Sayyid Hashim Haddad. Anyway, he has a ton of books. This is one of his books, but he hasn't really compiled it. He's put together a few letters between two of the greatest of all time. And the book is called Tawhīd ilmi va aini. Okay? Which means ilmi Tawhīd versus aini Tawhīd. This is one of those books, just stay away from it, okay? Just stay away from it. Because it is hard. It is a very hard book to understand. And I remember picking this book up like maybe 10 years ago or something. I was like, this is not for me. I opened it up recently, a couple days ago or something, or yesterday was it. I was looking at it again. I was like, okay, I'm understanding a little more than I used to understand from it, but still, it's very heavy. And so anyway, ilmi Tawhīd, theoretical Tawhīd versus aini Tawhīd. When you say aina najasat, what does that mean? When you say something is aina najasat, what does that mean? That means versus mutanajjis. Aina najasat means najasat itself. Actual najasat. Najasat in real life. Najasat incarnate. Whatever you want to say. Embodied. Whatever you want to say. Okay? Theoretical Tawhid and actual Tawhid. What's the story now? Let me read off of the introduction to this book. He says that in those years, and really my apologies if today is a little deeper than usual. We're almost done anyway. We have a couple more weeks and we're going to be done, inshallah. He says in the years that the great Akhund Mullah Muhammad Kazim Khurasani was alive. Akhund Khurasani, he's very famous, very, very famous, and he was the Za'im and the head of the Hawza of Najaf in his time. One of the students of Shaykh al-Ansari, the great of his time, and others. Anyway, Akhund Khurasani, someone writes a letter to him. He's also a Shaykh himself. This Shaykh writes a letter and he asks about 2 lines of poetry in the book of Mantiq al-Tayr of Shaykh al-Attar. And this is in Farsi. I'll read it to you very quickly. It's about God. It says, Da'iman u padishah mutlaq ast. Okay? Which you can probably guess what that means. Padshah mutlaq hai. Dar kamal izz khud mustaghraq ast. So God, Da'iman, always, perpetually, is the king, the ultimate absolute king. And king here, of course, means, you know what it means, Lord. He is engulfed in his own honor, nobility, greatness, izzat. That's not the hard part. That line is not hard. The next line is hard. I spent a lot of time trying to figure it out. I couldn't crack it. او به سر ناید ز خود آنجا که اوست کی رسد عقل وجود آنجا که اوست. I don't even know if I read it right. This last part right here. کی رسد عقل وجود آنجا که اوست, or کی رسد عقل وجود آنجا که اوست. My guess is that it's عقل وجود آنجا که اوست. Anyway, it's a tough one. And so this person is asking, and of course it's deep Tawhid. This person is asking the grand marja of his time, what does this mean? And so it says that he answered in 3 lines, and he said, I can't explain any more than this. No, I don't have time to explain more. Now this Shaykh, he's not going to give up. He didn't get his answer the way he wanted to from Akhund Khurasani. So what does he do? It says that he wrote this question down and he asked it from 2 of the other greats of his time. That's beautiful, man. He lives in a time Akhund Khurasani is alive. He lives in a time Muhammad Hussein al-Isfahani, also known as Kompani, is alive. This is one of the teachers of Ayatollah Bahjat. Not spiritual necessarily teachers, but one of the ilmi teachers of Ayatollah Bahjat and the Hawza back then, and the Khu'is and all of them. So he writes the same letter to him, asking him what that line means. And he also writes to Sayyid Ahmad Karbala'i. He's also one of the greatest. I wish we had a picture of him. We don't. We have a picture of Khurasani. We have a picture of Isfahani, also known as Kompani. We have a picture of these 2. One only, I think. Just one of each of them. Black and white. But we don't have a picture of Sayyid Ahmad Karbala'i, unfortunately. Who is he? He's the spiritual guide and teacher of Allama Qadi, who was the teacher of the Bahjats and Tabatabayis and all of them. And there's some interesting stories about him. Alright, so he asked the same question from him. Why? What's the difference between these 2? Well, let's see what he says here. It says he sent this question to each of them. The answer of Sayyid Ahmad Karbala'i was different than the answer of Shaykh al-Kompani. We'll call him by the nickname that they had given him. They were different. Opposite to each other. He says mukhalif. They went against each other. Why? Because Shaykh, so we'll just say Shaykh and Sayyid. Shaykh Kompani, Sayyid Karbala'i. Shaykh had answered the question based on Tawhīd ind al-Hukama, the Tawhīd of the Hukama, the Tawhīd of the philosophers. While Sayyid Ahmad, on the other hand, had answered based on Tawhīd ind al-Urafa, the Tawhīd of the Urafa and the mystics. I don't even know why I'm saying all of this, because when you start talking about these things, if you're not careful, you might think that there's something special about you just because you're saying the story. There's nothing special about you if you know this story, okay? I'm talking to myself, okay? So now, Shaykh Kompani, he says this line of poetry is talking about the sifat thubutiyya, right? Those affirmed qualities of God versus the negated qualities of God. negated, for example, God has restrictions. God is, like, let's say, God is a material being. That is one of the negated qualities of God, meaning He doesn't have such a quality. Okay? God is jism, material. That's a negated quality of Allah. On the flip side, you have sifat thubutiyya, those that are actually exist for God, like ilm, like power, like qudra, knowledge, these things. Okay. Shaykh Kompani, he says, remember, he's a philosopher. And he's known for that. Even in his fiqh and usul, he's known for being philosophical in things. Okay, he says, okay, this is talking about how the qualities of God, those affirmed positive qualities of God, are one with His existence. So I'll give you an example. If I say so-and-so is tall, so-and-so is short, so-and-so is ignorant, so-and-so is knowledgeable, that means they have knowledge, they have this, they have that. Question, is knowledge one thing, or being knowledgeable one thing, and then they're another thing? No, we say if you want to point to the knowledgeable, the thing that is holding knowledge, or the knowledge itself, it's within that person himself. You can't separate these two in the actual world. Okay? In actual existence, you can't separate them. They're all one. There isn't like 10 people, 10 things here. One of them is me, one of them is my knowledge, one of them is... They're all coming together in one being. It's part of my being. Knowledge is part of my being. Same thing with Allah, they say. And this is the conventional theology that we have. That God's qualities are one. We call this Tawhīd Sifati. Sifat means qualities. Tawhīd Sifati means that this doesn't cause multiplicity in God's entity and existence when He has certain qualities. Still, He's one. So Shaykh Kompani, he says, that is what this line of poetry is saying. All of a sudden though, Sayyid Ahmad Karbalai, he says something else. He says that Allah's essence is above and beyond everything, even the asma, and the qualities are even, He's above those even. Don't even use qualities. And it reaches a point where they talk about how Imam Ali in Nahj al-Balagha, the first khutbah of Nahj al-Balagha, he says, Kamalu Tawhīd, Nafyu Sifati an. If you really want to get it right when it comes to Allah's Tawhid, strip Him of all qualities. Because any quality you have in mind is probably limited. And according to these urafa, even if it's not unlimited quality, it's something that doesn't have any restrictions, and it's the pure form of the quality, even then you're still restricting God. I don't know how that works, by the way, because I'm more, subscribed to the philosophical school. I'm not an arif to be able to say what the urafa say. But Sayyid Ahmad Karbalai, he says, no, Allah's essence, Allah's pure essence is higher than all of this. The Farsi says, Zat aqdas'u az har ism و rasmi balatar ast. It's higher than all of them. And that region and realm of God's existence is so high that nothing can get there, even the aql of a person can't understand. So don't say, oh yeah, we can understand ilm, knowledge and all that, and it's one with Him. Don't even say that, it seems he's saying. Because before reaching that stage and level of Allah's existence, all uqul are annihilated and destroyed anyway. So that's what he says. So now this guy, he's the fitna monger, this shaykh, the little one that was taking these, he reads these two answers from these different ulama, and he's like, okay, I see a discrepancy here. So what's the thing you do when you see discrepancy between ulama? You fan the fuel, you fan the flames, I guess. So he takes this one's letter to that one and shows it to him. He's like, hey, this one said something else. So that one writes a rebuttal to this one. And so he takes this one to that one, and then that one writes a rebuttal to this one, right? There was no Twitter back then, so you just like respond to each other's tweets. So this is the Twitter. Twitter was back 150 years ago. It was there, I'm telling you. And so this goes back and forth to 14 letters. Okay? And they go into a whole bunch of topics, actually. Yeah. And he says that when you read these letters, and guess what? Just to add as much more masala as you can, like this itself was a good dish. I mean, this is like something to read and actually, discuss. And it's like 300 pages, by the way. So if that wasn't enough, the cherry on the icing is this, that Allama Tabatabai has a whole commentary on all of this as well. And his student of Allama Tehrani, he's the one who's brought these all together into this one book. Yeah. And then the parts that Allama Tabatabai wasn't able to finish, Allama Tehrani has finished for him. Okay. And so to end, he says this. He says that the Shaykh Kompani, which is huge, he's huge. He was using burhan and argumentation and whatever, deductive reasoning and all of that. While Sayyid Ahmad Karbalai was also using burhan, but adding to that zawq, shuhud, wujdan, and these things as well. Okay? When you add those, it might be a little hard for it to be universally binding now on people who read it. But he was also sharing his view on that. And so it's interesting how Tawhīd ilmi, theoretical Tawhīd, is one level of Tawhīd. But then the other level of it sometimes is so much more loftier that it seems like it is contradicting this Tawhīd to begin with. That's how far apart these are. And I'm pretty sure there's little levels in between all of these. But yeah, the theoretical Tawhīd versus the Aini Tawhīd, actual Tawhīd, which is an active thing, which is something that's actively done according to them. And that oneness is brought about by the individual. May Allah give us a little bit and a little taste of this. And if He doesn't, at least to be able to read up on some of these things and understand there's a lot more going on out there than what we see in this little dunya of ours. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Any questions?
I'm not sure how true this is, but it's about Allah talking about saying that, right? The Holy Prophet said only two that actually understand or know Allah is myself and not everyone. So if you're taking like the, or if I answer this question that strip God of all His properties and only His essence looks it, so then when it comes to the prophets and imams, they're at that level where they actually understand the true essence of Allah.
I don't even know if we can say they understand the true essence of Allah. But what we can say is they understand the essence of Allah a lot better than everyone else. Right? The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Imam Ali alayhi salam, these ones, what's for sure is that they have much better understanding. Can they encompass knowledge of the essence of God? I don't think they can. I don't think they can. I don't think they can. They would claim such a thing. But once again, if you want to take it to from an irfani perspective and say that they bear the haqiqa Muhammadiyya, or they are the haqiqa Muhammadiyya, and that is, one with Allah as if, and over there it's all oneness, and so there is no separation for them to not get it right or get it right or not have the full picture and all of that. That's a different story. I don't know. I can't comment on that. Okay. All in all, what we're sure about is that they are the highest when it comes to this Tawhīd, for sure. Now, do they have all of it? Or do they have some of it? Depends on your understanding from our literature. That's the only thing we can use to come to a conclusion. Some of our literature will say that they go and they circulate around the throne of Allah every Shab Jummah, and more ma'rifah is added to them. Correct? I think this is an usul al-kafi. If that's the case, then that means that, okay, they haven't encompassed it all. What's for sure is they are way up there and we're way down here. Yeah. Yeah.
Talking about these things are like the level that feel like I can never attain. So, what are the practical implications that I can utilize this in my day-to-day life?
How can I use all of this in my day-to-day life? For me personally, the use that it has for me is that whenever I get a little too engaged with dunya, I take a look at these things and I figure that, there's a lot more going on. So let me try my best. Look, every extra step we take in this life, we will see it on the other side. It's not like a billionaire that has $200 billion and then they add $1 million to their estate, and now they have $200 billion and $1 million. And so, do you feel the difference if you have $1 million or not? No. But with them, it's not. In Akhirah, it's not the case. Even if you have $200 billion in the Akhirah, and you add one more dollar to that, you feel that, you see it, and that's what it is. And we talk about this in our death course a lot. that it is, barzakh is for our growth to the point where we are ready for Yawm al-Qiyamah. Because in Yawm al-Qiyamah, every little bit will count. So what do I do with this? If I'm not going to get here, we have a saying in Farsi, it makes sense, that if I can't draw the whole water of the ocean and sea, I can at least take to the amount that I can from the sea. This is a sea that I can't get to the bottom of, but let me get as much of it as I can. And so stay motivated for me personally. Going through these things allows me to stay focused a little bit and not lose sight of the bigger picture, the more important picture of things. That I can get as close as I can to this at least. Inshallah, yeah. And who knows, sometimes knowing that there is stuff like this out there, a person will have that moment in their life where they make that decision to move in this direction. Versus if you don't even know that this stuff is out there, you're going to always stay a kindergartner in this journey that we're on. It's better to know these things, and we've talked about this before as well. It's very important to know that these things are out there. Imam Khomeini points these out. It's very important to know that these things are out there, versus not knowing at all that they're even out there to begin with, for sure. But yeah, we're not going to spend all of our life studying this either. Yeah, the Quran. Look at the Quran. Most of the verses are normal verses, but then they will sprinkle this kind of Tawhīd in them as well. And so you pick that up. You're like, oh, there is more going on here. Yeah. So I think it is important, and it will have that effect whether we feel it or not in our lives. Knowing it versus not knowing it at all, not spending time on it at all. All right. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.